Indiana Corn Growers Association and Indiana Soybean Alliance present Indiana Ag Policy with your host, Eric Pfeiffer.
Welcome in and thank you for joining us on the Indiana Ag Policy Podcast. It's presented by the Indiana Corn Growers Association, Indiana Soybean Alliance, with support from Indiana Farm Bureau. I'm Eric Pfeiffer from Hoosier Ag Today. Very happy to have you with us. We're here at the Indiana State Fair for this edition of the Indiana Ag Policy Podcast, just outside the Indiana Soybean Alliance glass barn. And we're talking about a number of things today. We're talking about the Rural Caucus that took place today over in the Normandy barn. We're also talking about a big event that happened here in Indiana not too long ago. And for that, I welcome in Representative Beau Baird, State Representative Baird. Thank you for joining us. We've got a ton of things to cover, but first off, here at the fair, I've seen you out here now at least a few times.
Absolutely.
It's a good time. You have to love this time of year.
You have to love it. Like, this is the Super Bowl of agriculture is what I keep hearing, and it's absolutely true. And this weather, I mean, this is perfect weather for us to be sitting outside, not sweating. Like, this is heaven to me.
Well, speak for yourself. I'm a little beady here. I've been out here for a little while. But Beau, let's talk about first the Rural Caucus, and we will get into more of that a little bit later on with Senator Gene Leising and Senator Gary Byrne. But talk about the importance of the Rural Caucus. Senator Leising, she said you've helped her with some of this and bringing some folks together. It's a bipartisan event that people who represent rural Hoosiers, which it's a lot of the legislators there at the State House, they can come and just kind of hear directly from these organizations that represent rural Hoosiers.
Absolutely. First of all, I have to say Senator Leising is doing a great job. In all the years that I've been coming, and that includes before I was elected, I think this was the largest crowd I've ever seen at a Rural Caucus. And what that means to me is that there's more people that care about rural Indiana. Because the big concern I have is as populations start to shift to our urban areas, I'm constantly worried about in the next census, what's the representation going to look like for our rural areas in the General Assembly? With that said, though, just thrilled to see so many people coming out today and engage in these critically important issues. I think that Senator Leising would agree with this probably, but I felt it during session this year. I felt more people engaged on food security, health conditions in the rural area, just a lot more focus on the rural area than I feel like I've seen in the past.
Well, we love to hear that at Hoosier Ag Today. That's our audience. That's right. Who we're talking to is rural Indiana. So that's great. And again, we'll get more into the Rural Caucus here a little bit later on in the podcast. But Beau, I want to ask you about a big event that happened here in Indiana not too long ago. We got some folks from DC to come out this way. I know EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin was here. Your dad, Representative Jim Baird, was here and really made kind of some big announcements and some big things happen. Explain to us what was going on.
Yeah, so the importance of this was, and Secretary Wright was here for the Department of Energy as well. The importance of what they were trying to do is really to roll back these Washington mandates for Green New Deal and EVs and all these mandates that are costing $3 trillion to farmers, small businesses, my constituents, and all Hoosiers. And I think a number that I saw that day was $54 billion annually will be coming back to people, right back into their pockets because they now have a choice, right? And I that's what I believe it comes down to is choice. People should have the right to choose what they want to buy and how they want to participate in the market. I think I'm a prime example of it. I bought a new car during session. Didn't want to buy a new car, but my old car had too many miles on it. I needed to upgrade. I ended up buying a hybrid. Didn't want to buy a hybrid, but they had 0% offering. Well, guess what? When I go to plug that hybrid in somewhere in Putnam County, you can't find a charger. There's not a charger anywhere. So having a one-size-fits-all mandate out of Washington is just ridiculous, and farmers and small business owners should have a right and have a choice.
As we're talking here, I should point out, for those watching on video, we do have some bubbles flying through in the background, the big bubble machine there at the glass barn. One almost caught you, man.
Yeah, I dodged.
I was actually looking for it. I was hoping it might just catch your cheek there. But so Beau, we talk about this, and really, let's just talk about the EV mandate first off, these electric vehicles. This was something that it was just so odd to me. Out in California, they put this mandate together out there some time ago. Governor Newsom announces we're going to have this EV mandate, and then later that week he says, hey, it's a little too hot out. Can everybody, at nighttime turn off your AC?
Right.
Too much of a strain on the power grid.
Right.
How can those things happen within days of each other? And I can't imagine that California is the only place where this is the issue.
I can't imagine that either, but it's not going to be an issue in Indiana, I can tell you that, because I think that we have a common sense approach, and I think that's probably why Secretary Wright and Administrator Zeldin picked Indiana to come to. I think there were a lot of other synergies. I think Governor Braun has great relationships with the administration and those in Washington. My father served with Administrator Zeldin, and it all kind of, I want to step back for a minute and just talk about how it came about. So Congressman Baird was in D.C. at an event, and he ran into Administrator Zeldin, and he said, hey, I want to come to Indiana for something. And so that night, Dad's talking to me. I said, hey, I just became chairman of Environmental Affairs. I think it's within my realm to offer an extended invitation to him. And Dad's like, well, why don't you do that? And I'll write a supportive letter. So we both did that. And then Braun jumped in. And I think there's just so much synergy going on in Indiana between our administration, the Washington administration, and really just looking for common sense approaches to fixing some of this. So,
as you see your role as the chair of that committee, what did this all mean to you? What does it mean for Hoosiers? What does it really mean for us?
I'm going to tell you, so I used to be vice chair of the House Ag Committee before I became chairman of Environmental Affairs. I'm going to tie the two together because I sat through the farm awards this morning, the Hoosier
Homestead Awards.
Hoosier Homestead Awards, yeah. And you see generations of farmers that have lived on the same land for all these years. And what really sank into me as I'm sitting there is, we know environmental policy. We don't want to damage this land, and these families are proving that we can have good environmental policies and have a thriving economy. And so when I step back after I made that realization this morning and think about the administrator and the secretary being here, is it all just ties together. I mean, our good farm practices, good environmental policy, and back to your original question of what's that really mean? It gives consumers and farmers and truckers choices, which is going to reduce transportation costs, reduce consumer costs. If I'm buying a package of meat at the store or anything that's been transported, which means more money in our constituents' pockets.
As we go through all of this, one of the big arguments, even with going with the EV mandates and everything else, is this is going to cut back on liquid fuel, obviously. And that is a huge market for our farmers. E10 alone, which is the standard, but moving toward things like E15, that's got to be a consideration too for our farmers.
Oh, absolutely. I 100% agree with you.
Yeah. I mean, this is just something that we have to keep in mind and make sure that our farmers are on top of. Beau, tell me a little bit more just about the event and what it was like to be there. Obviously, you mentioned, Administrator Zeldin, Secretary Wright, your dad, Congressman Baird, the governor was there, Mike Braun, you were there.
The Attorney General, Todd Rokita.
Yeah.
I think Congressman Messer was in the audience. It was just a great day. I mean, it was just, I guess for me, it was a great day to see Indiana spotlighted. For them to pick Indiana and to come here to make this announcement just showed that we're doing things right, I guess, in my opinion.
We're sitting here in August, and I know it's tough to really, prognosticate what's going to come here in the future. But when we do get back into the legislative session, was there anything that you learned, whether it be that day or here today at the Rural Caucus, that you see as a pressing issue, one that you think you might want to champion, one that you think might come across through the Environmental Affairs Committee? What do you see as some issues that might come forward in this non-budget year, which sometimes tends to be a bit quieter, right?
We can hope it's a bit quieter. I don't know that will be the case. It doesn't seem like
that's not what I keep hearing.
Doesn't seem like that happens. Couple of things that I'd bring up. So just having the opportunity to speak with Administrator Zeldin and Secretary Wright, I offered them an open invitation to come back. but more importantly, to extend if there was anything I could do legislatively to help with the policies, I was happy to do that. So I think just them knowing that we have a willingness to work with them opens that door for a good, strong communication and dialogue. One topic that came up to me this morning was digesters, and I really didn't think this was something that was going to be on my radar for next session. But we have a digester that wants to come to Indiana. I want to say it was $54 million of investment in a rural county. But they take animal waste, but they also take food waste. And so they're having a little bit of trouble getting through the processing part with IDEM. I think IDEM wants to be receptive and helpful, but if they can't, it's definitely something I want to look at legislatively, because that's a huge impact for our rural communities. Those are real jobs and real money in our communities. So,
well, Beau, this is all just good news for farmers, for rural Hoosiers. Thank you for coming on the Indiana Ag Policy Podcast, and feel free to come back on anytime. We'd love to chat policy with you, especially as we get closer to the legislative session, for sure.
Yeah, so. Anytime. Happy to be here.
We'll come back with more here on the Indiana Ag Policy Podcast. It's presented by the Indiana Corn Growers Association, Indiana Soybean Alliance, and also Indiana Farm Bureau.
There is strength in numbers. That's why the Indiana Soybean Alliance membership and policy and Indiana Corn Growers Association need you. These organizations represent Indiana soybean and corn farmers on critical and regulatory issues affecting their industry. Along with support from the national organizations, National Corn Growers Association and American Soybean Association, the Indiana members help determine public policy positions on critical issues, including farm bills, trade policy, and ethanol and biodiesel legislation. Become a member of Indiana Soybean Alliance membership, Indiana Corn Growers Association, or both. Visit incornandsoy.org to select a membership. That's incornandsoy.org.
Eric Pfeiffer here, back on the Indiana Ag Policy Podcast. We're at the Indiana State Fair, and today the Rural Caucus was held in the Normandy Barn, and I'm with State Senator Gary Byrne. First off, Senator, thank you so much for joining us, and talk about what area of the state it is you cover.
Yeah, so I'm in the rural part of the state, Harrison County, where Corden, First State Capital, is located at, and we have Washington County and Floyd County, and so I'm representing probably 2/3 of my Senate area is in rural. So very important to know what's going on in agriculture up here today.
And you serve on the Senate Ag Committee as well in the Senate.
Absolutely, and lived on a farm all my life. The farm's been in the family since 1808, and so rural farm life is very important to me.
Well, that's great. Let's talk about this Rural Caucus. It's something that, you guys get together, you talk through some issues, but to me, it's just great that the Rural Caucus exists, that there's a group of legislators that are worried about what's happening in rural Indiana, and this is kind of a day to come and bring all that together, right?
Absolutely, and this Rural Caucus exists, from all the hard work, especially our Senator Gene Leising, our Ag Chair, puts into this, and the topics that's discussed is important topics to people in the rural communities, and so she does a great job putting this together, and all the accolades go to her for this happening too.
Let's just talk about some of the issues that were raised. I know you heard from Governor Braun today. He was here for a part of the Rural Caucus. Other issues, other folks from rural Indiana came in to talk about some of the issues they're facing in Indiana agriculture and in Indiana's rural communities. What were some of those items?
Well, I wasn't there for the whole thing, but at the end of where I was, it was the rural hospitals. I think some of the legislation that maybe is passed in D.C. they was worried about, but I honestly think that that's not a big of an issue for those rural hospitals. So, I think it's a Medicare issue. So some of that was discussed today, and I think we've heard that the reimbursements is where the problem's at there. So that's one issue that was brought up. Governor Braun, I was there early on too when Governor Braun spoke, and he's a governor that's in tune with the rural community. He's been involved with farming and actually owns some farmland and forestry, so he's very in tune to what's going on there. And I think a lot of the issues is what government gets into, especially on the unelected bureaucrats that could cause farmers problems, and I think he'll be somebody that's in tune with that and make sure that government isn't the problem, and government should be helpful and not hurtful to its citizens, especially its farmers. And so that's what I'm really encouraged about what I heard from the governor today.
And if you're watching here on the Indiana Ag Policy Podcast, we are out front of the glass barn, the Indiana Soybean Alliance glass barn. We do have some bubbles flying behind. It's kind of fun out here at the State Fair.
Yep.
Senator, again, we talk about issues, and we were talking before we turned the camera and the audio on here that solar is one of these issues that it's a hot button issue really wherever you go in Indiana. Someone is on one side or the other. What is your take on solar? What is the take of the Rural Caucus, the Republicans that are in the Senate and in the House? Because again, this, one way or the other, folks can't seem to find a middle ground on this one.
Yeah, well, me personally, I wouldn't want to see solar next to me on my farm. But the state legislators, and my belief is too, that local control is the best option there. Your commissioners, it's in their hands right now. And I will tell you straight up, at the last 2024 election, I think we had 70 commissioners lose their seat in certain counties that was in favor of solar, so the people spoke. So it works out. I think the government closest to you is the best government for probably making that decision. If I had a bill out there that mine would ban solar, because first of all, it's not reliable energy, and I don't believe it would even exist without the federal subsidies. And with President Trump in place, I think a lot of those subsidies are going to go away. And I think probably some of this issues is going to go. But what we need is reliable energy, and and believe it or not, solar or wind is not cheap because of all the subsidies, and the reliability is very important. So I think the small modular nuclear is the way that we're going to see the future take place to be a green energy, but that's a reliable energy. So that's sort of, I might actually serve on utility committee too, and so I've seen both arguments on that. But everybody wants their lights to come on when they turn that switch, and we don't want to see blackouts, and solar's not the answer for that.
And I know that if you look at the policy books for some of these ag organizations, I know Indiana Farm Bureau in particular, local control, that's kind of their stance on solar, is you can have it one way or the other, but let's let the local commissioners decide, like you referenced.
Yeah, and I'm 100% for property rights, but I'll give you an example. A farmer, if I want to open up a landfill, I don't have property rights to do that. So the same thing I think applies to the solar farms too. For me, I think that's where maybe government should step in and sort of regulate local, through the planning and zoning, whether or not that should take place. And each community has their own different ideals, and that's why the government closest to you is the best government. And I believe that is our answer. And I think we have heard, especially the last election, when you lost 70 commissioner seats that was pro-solar. So not all of them though, but a lot of them lost their seats, and that was one of the main reasons probably why they lost their seats.
Last one from here, Senator. We went through the Rural Caucus today. You heard some of these issues. I know it's hard to predict what might come down the pipeline, but when you do come back into the legislative session here come next year, early next year, what do you expect you might see facing you in the Ag Committee or facing rural Hoosiers?
That's a tough question. I haven't really seen anything that far out. For me, I'm always on the lookout for laws that causes more regulation and would oppose most of those things. I think the farmers are great stewards to the land, and that's more of what government shouldn't be doing is what I'm looking out for to block. And I think Senator Leising does a great job too in Ag Committee looking for those types of things. But we've had some very interesting bills in the past stopping China from buying property, farmland in our country. It's more of a security issue nationwide, but Indiana's taken the lead on that. But I really, right now, I don't have any radar ahead of any things like that that's coming up, but you know, it's something that I think we will be up to the challenge if there is any.
Senator, thank you so much for joining us on Hoosier Ag Today's Indiana Ag
Yes,
Policy
sir.
Podcast.
Appreciate the invite.
We'll be back right after this.
At Indiana Farm Bureau, we serve tree farmers, goat farmers, and in fact, all farmers. With over 250,000 members, Indiana Farm Bureau represents a broad range of farmers and puts power in your collective voice. You also get advice from our subject matter experts, more affordable health plan options, and support for youth programs statewide. So whether you grow soybeans or strawberries, membership means you'll be heard. Become a member today at infb.org.
Welcome back to the Indiana Ag Policy Podcast. Thanks to our sponsors, the Indiana Corn Growers Association, the Indiana Soybean Alliance, as well as Indiana Farm Bureau. Eric Pfeiffer here. We are at the fairgrounds. We've got all the fairground noises in the background, including crying kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
It happens.
Yeah,
it's a little hot
it's a
out
little
here.
warm. Yeah.
So we're here, and Senator Jean Leising is here. And Jean, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Really
Absolutely.
appreciate it. We're here to talk ag policy, and you had a whole bunch of folks today that were in one room talking about ag policy, yes, but issues that are facing rural Hoosiers. And it's this Rural Caucus that was kind of one of your brainchildren here. Talk about this Rural Caucus.
It was. Going back to the 2009 session, we started really putting it together. I don't know if we actually started meeting in the summer of 2009 or the summer of 2010, but Senator Richard Young, a Democrat from Southern Indiana, I'm a Republican from Southeastern Indiana, we decided to do it because there were so few legislators elected that really understood ag and rural. And you know, you say, well, why would that be? Well, if you think about it, most of the legislators, even if they have part of a rural area in their district, they actually probably live in the most populated part of their district, right? And so anyway, that's how we started it. And honestly, it just keeps growing. You know, today, even with everybody's crazy summer schedule, we had 30 plus legislators here. And I think the association people, we had double that. We had the speakers. There were well over 100 people in the Normandy barn. And we tried to have a mixed agenda. And I think that was important. We had everything from Homeland Security to the Department of Ag and their trade development. We had the healthcare people in regard to the impact of state and federal legislation on hospitals. We actually had food safety, which has been important to me because there have been some bills passed in the last session of the legislature that I actually didn't move out of the Senate Ag because I felt like maybe they went too far. And you know, we have food safety regulations in our state. We want a safe food supply. So we don't want to throw, as I always say, the baby out with the bathwater. So we may have to look at some of the things if they are too regulatory, too cumbersome, and not necessary. But I think it went too far. You know, people in Indiana, people in the U.S. don't realize what a safe food supply we really have.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I've had the opportunity to travel for leisure, for fun, after my youngest got out of Purdue. And I'm like, I've been in lots of places in the world where you better know what you're putting in your mouth before you eat, or you will be sick.
When you talk about that, it makes me think, you know, we've had all these conversations about MAHA and MIHA, and I think that there are a lot of things in that. You can like some of them, not like some of them. You don't have to take the whole thing, but what it should ultimately come down to is we do have the safest, the most efficient, the best food system in the world, and people shouldn't forget that.
People shouldn't forget it. I think people take for granted sometimes that they don't, I mean, if they haven't had the opportunity to travel where, you know, if you're in China and they're serving little bits of meat, you probably should know what those little bits of meat are, because they could be bat, rat, or cat, you know, not things we would normally eat. That's probably not a great example, but it is in a way. I mean, but you have to be careful even when you travel, not just to the water, but, you know, if you're eating uncooked food, uncooked fruits or vegetables, you know, what kind of water were they washed in? If I eat these, am I going to get sick? You don't ever have to worry about that here. You know, probably the most unhealthy thing some people like me do is when our lives are fast and we drive through a drive-through and we go, well, it might not have been the healthiest food. I mean, it wasn't fresh fruit and vegetables, but you know, the truth is it's not going to make us sick.
Right. Jean, as we talk about this Rural Caucus, the issues that are facing rural Hoosiers, and then bringing that back to the legislature, and when you come back into the legislative session, you are the chair of the Senate Ag Committee. Is there anything that came up today that you foresee, we might see a bill on this, or this might be a priority of mine? Well,
I'm sure that there's going to be food safety issues, right? I mean, I think that some of those bills will be back again, and I hope that some of the people that brought those bills were listening today, so that they understand why I didn't move their bills, because I thought it would jeopardize the safety of our food supply. The other thing I'm hoping that people were listening to today is how important agricultural exports are. You know, Indiana has a $35 billion agricultural industry. And people just don't realize that. You know, I was just in a meeting in the last couple days where I wanted to stand up and scream. They were talking about other economic development, and I said, hey, don't forget. Agriculture is, you know, it's an annual amount of $35 billion, and that doesn't include all the extra things that are connected with it. I mean, we just heard, we had the horse racing industry speak this afternoon, and that alone is a $2 billion industry without any additional things that are gained by having horses raised in every one of our counties now. You know, so there's so many things that that potentially we could see, but I really tried to diversify this today so that it would attract legislators with all different interests, because the idea
bipartisan, right?
Bipartisan, absolutely. And I actually have Senator Yoder, the Democrat minority leader in the Senate, helping, and I think that's important. But Senator Glick, a Republican senator and ranking member in the Senate Ag with me, was helping, and then Representative Baird, and then Representative Ellsworth, who's the House Ag chairman. I mean, it's a kind of a team effort, you know? How do we do what's right for Indiana consumers? How do we do what's right for Indiana farmers and rural businesses? But there's a lot engaged to do it right, you know, and some of those old things that we've done, we don't even know why, you know. I mean, I had a question, we had the food safety section, I asked about, you know, the safety of, it's popular to have backyard chickens, it's popular for people to have their own eggs. Are they as safe as the ones you buy in the grocery store? No, they're probably not, unless they're properly taken care of, see? But people don't realize that. So, you know, we just have, we have lots to think about, lots to do.
Senator Jean Leising, thank you so much for coming on the Indiana Ag Policy Pod. You are welcome anytime.
Okay, well, absolutely. I really think we should get the message out to our people, to all of our constituents, to residents of Indiana. We want everybody to be happy and healthy and all that good stuff, right?
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much.
Jean Leising, chair of the Senate Ag Committee for Indiana. Thank you so much for joining us. And Thank you for joining us on another edition of the Indiana Ag Policy Podcast. It's been presented by the Indiana Corn Growers Association, the Indiana Soybean Alliance, as well as support from Indiana Farm Bureau. We'll do it again next time. Thank you for joining us.